The heat signature had not moved in 90 minutes, and that was the problem. Hunt Prime Dovec score had 340 confirmed kills logged with the Council. He had tracked prey across 6 biomes, in zero-visibility conditions, through radiation wash and thermal noise and every kind of terrain that a frightened animal could use to buy itself another hour. He knew what a scared creature looked like on a sensor array. It moved. It always moved. Even when it tried to be still, fear pushed blood to the surface and the heat pit organs caught it. A warm ghost pulsing against the background cold. This signature was not pulsing. It sat at 0.7 degrees above ambient, exactly the right size, right where the terrain analysis said a fatigued human would stop. It had not shifted a single centimeter, in the time it had taken SCORE to cross the open ground between the ridge and threshold point 11. No weapons logged, no military records filed, no prior engagement history. He extended the kill rod. The barbed tip caught the gray light. He took one step toward the signature, then another. On the second step, the ground gave back a sound it should not have made, not the flat press of boot on soil, something hollow, a faint push of air from somewhere underneath. SCORE stopped. His heat pit organs were reading the signature at 0.7 degrees, clean and steady. His feet were telling him something else. He looked down. Foil, a stone wrapped in foil, roughly the size and shape of a curled human, with a small chemical heat pack taped to its underside. Still warm, 4 kilograms, maybe 5. He stood there. The log would later show he stood there for 6 minutes. Assessor Veldroon's observation relay captured all of it, the still figure, the extended rod, the empty terrain in every direction his sensors could reach. There is no council form for what SCORE was doing during those 6 minutes. No outcome code. No classification. The 2 checkbox form that had governed 22 prior engagements without revision had no box for a Hunt Prime standing alone over a warm stone at a grid coordinate called threshold point 11, at hour 14 of a hunt that had already ended. Droon filed that log with 47 triple taps on the edge of his data slate. You'll want to know how this started. Believe me, it gets stranger before it makes sense. 6 weeks earlier, the wrong form was on Assessor Veldroon's desk. Or rather, Droon had reached for the standard pre-engagement intake packet and found that the standard packet was, for the first time in his 14 prior dispatches, the wrong one. No correct packet existed. There was no protocol form for a species that accepted a prey designation in writing, without legal challenge, and then requested a single accommodation, that the engagement zone map be provided to them 21 days in advance for what they called acclimatization purposes. The Council had granted the request. It seemed like mercy. Droon triple-tapped the edge of his data slate once, out of habit, before opening a new log file. He had done this before every intake he had ever filed. He did not yet know why the habit had started. He would understand by hour 14. The designation chamber sat at the top of the orbital station's axial column, which put the floor-to-ceiling viewing panels directly above the culling flats of Voan 9. The planet had a temperate plateau biome, flat, open, long sightlines, the kind of terrain that rewarded thermal detection and penalized anything without a clear heat suppression capability. It smelled, Droon noted in his first log entry, like copper after rain. He could not actually smell it from orbit. He wrote it anyway because it was in the intake briefing, and he was thorough. The Council vote ran 9-2 in favor of prey designation. The dissenting votes were not logged by name. That was standard procedure, same as it had always been. A specialist at the Chamber's center podium read the human species metrics into the record. 0 natural weapons of Council-classified offensive rating, measurable fear response consistent across documented contact events, flight instinct registered in every prior interaction file. The Chamber voted. The charter machinery ran exactly as it had run 21 times before. Outcome form was pulled, 2 checkboxes. Droon descended toward Voan 9 2 days later, thinking about drainage. He had not been thinking about drainage. He had been reviewing the pre-engagement terrain scan, which confirmed what the intake brief had said. The culling flats favored the hunters on every measurable axis. Flat ground for thermal tracking. Long sightlines for the Vuresci compound visual arrays. No natural cover dense enough to break a heat signature. He filed a preliminary note, zone structurally favorable to designated hunters, no anomalies, and closed the file. The humans arrived at the intake zone on the morning of the engagement. 50 of them. Council intake staff ran bioscans at the entry point and logged what they found. Elevated heart rates, visible perspiration in roughly 30 of the 50 individuals, scattered grouping with poor cohesion, minimal eye contact with the alien intake staff. Standard prey behavior profile. The logs from that morning are clean and confident. The intake team marked the file low resistance. high sport value, and forwarded it to Hunt Prime's Score aboard his descent craft. Score read the file over the last meal before drop. He told his second, a Theran hunter with 67 confirmed kills whose designation was Grellscore, "We'll be done before the thermal window closes." Grellscore did not reply. He was already running the terrain analysis for the third time. He was thorough for a hunter. He would be the first one the terrain ate. The 50 humans moved through the intake line in small clusters. They carried very little. A few had personal items logged as comfort objects. One carried a bundle wrapped in insulated foil, logged by a staff member as personal thermal comfort item. The staff member noted it but did not open it. There was no protocol requiring inspection of comfort items. Everything was technically correct. Sable Orin arrived last. She was carrying nothing visible. No bag, no equipment, no logged personal item. The intake scan flagged her as low threat, terrain familiarity noted as moderate, and she read that classification off the screen when the staff member turned it toward her. She read it aloud, quietly, at roughly the speed of someone reading a menu they already know. Then she said nothing further. She walked through the intake gate and stood to one side while the rest of the group was processed. Droon noted her in his log. He wrote, "Last intake subject, female, no declared items, low agitation markers relative to group baseline. Appears calm, possibly dissociated from the situation, a known stress response in some human subgroups." Her topographic map was in her left boot. It had been there for 19 days. They filed the paperwork. They accepted the designation. They showed up on time. An older man near the back of the group, sun-faded jacket. Too many pockets. The kind of unhurried quality that reads as confusion until you realize he is simply not in a hurry. Stopped one of the intake officers before moving through the gate. "Does the engagement zone have good drainage after rain?" he asked. "I mean specifically the plateau sections. Some of those flat topographies don't drain the way you'd expect, and I just want to know if the low points collect." The intake officer had no framework for this question. He marked it irrelevant query in the log. He moved on. Droon triple-tapped his slate, once out of habit. The old man was Fenwick Dahl, age 67, retired terrain cartographer. His engagement zone pre-survey had been filed on day 2 of the 21-day acclimatization window. It was 94 pages long. The standard pre-engagement survey was 3 pages. The council had logged it as excessive documentation, no action required. Of the 50 human volunteers, 31 had no prior military designation. 11 were listed in council intake records as agricultural workers. One was a retired cartographer, age 67. The engagement zone opened at dawn, local time. Hunt Prime Score's unit entered from the northern vector. 3 Vuresi pack hunters, bioluminescent fringe running along the full length of their dorsal spines, bright against the flat gray light, took the eastern approach. Grellscore led a 4-hunter Theran subunit from the west. 12 Apex hunters in total. The humans had already been in the zone for 40 minutes when the engagement formally opened, because they had walked in at first light, before the official start, and nobody had stopped them because nothing in Charter 7 Tertiary prohibited early entry into the acclimatization zone. Everything was technically correct. The humans scattered. They ran in small groups of 3 and 4, splitting and resplitting across the flat ground, moving in the directions that frightened prey in open terrain always moved, toward whatever cover was available, toward the edges of the zone, making the noise that frightened animals make. Score watched his thermal array and saw exactly what he expected to see. He told Grellscore to take the western cluster. He took the northern signature himself. 4 minutes after the engagement opened, every human heat signature dropped below trackable threshold simultaneously. All 50 in 4 seconds. Score queried council tech support, assuming instrument error. He ran a full-array diagnostic. He checked the atmospheric interference readings. He looked at the sky, which had the flat white quality of a morning before rain and smelled like copper. He checked his array again. No panic, no scatter, no mistakes. The signatures were gone. Not faded out the way a signature fades when it moves behind a terrain feature. Not spread across the zone as scattered dots. Just gone all at once, like something had reached into the array and turned off 50 switches at the same time. It was not instrument error. Council thermal imaging from Hour 3 confirms it. All 50 human heat signatures vanished from trackable range within a 4-second window. No recorded species has ever achieved collective thermal suppression without technology rated Class 6 or above. The humans used repurposed insulation sheeting and their own controlled breathing. Not one piece of equipment they brought into that zone was rated above Class 1, by council intake standards. The sheeting had been pre-cut to body size and folded flat, distributed in segments among the 50 volunteers so no individual carried a flagged amount. The breathing technique, slowing the respiratory cycle to cut radiated heat output. They had practiced for 3 weeks in a rented warehouse on a temperate station, 3 jumps from Vaughan 9. Droon triple-tapped his slate and wrote, "Hour 1 anomaly, signatures lost, investigating instrument failure." He paused, he triple-tapped again. He deleted instrument failure and wrote signatures lost and closed the entry. Score moved his unit north in the direction where signatures had last been tracked, running on visual and the compound eye input from his team. The terrain was flat. The morning light was spreading. The ground between his position and the edge of the northern zone was open and clear and held nothing his sensors could find. He had never, in 340 engagements, lost a target signature this completely. He kept moving. He did not report the loss to the council relay because there was no form for it. 3 hours into the engagement, Grell's score was dead. He had been following a heat trace, faint, below normal human output but within the range of a cold or injured individual. That moved in slow, irregular patterns across the western section. It moved the way something moves when it is trying not to be heard. The trace led into a shallow depression in the plateau, maybe 4 feet deep, so gradual at the edges that the drop was only visible from directly above. The ground surface over it was flat and uniform. Woven grass stretched tight across a frame of cut branches. A thin layer of foil underneath the grass that matched the thermal signature of the surrounding soil to within 0.2 degrees. Fenwick Dahl had dug that pit on day 4 of the 21-day window. It had taken him 6 hours. He was 67 years old and had spent his working life reading terrain from maps, and in that time he had developed the opinion that the most honest thing any piece of ground could tell you was where its water went. The western plateau drained toward that depression. He knew this because of the drainage question he had asked at intake, and the 17 other times he had asked variants of the same question to every survey, drone, and terrain mapping database he could access during the 3 weeks before the hunt. The stakes at the bottom of the pit were fire-hardened. The trap was older than the Therans' recorded hunting culture. It predated their species' first killrod by approximately 14,000 years. Droon wrote this in his log and then sat with it for a moment before moving on. Grell's score did not get up. 67 confirmed kills. He had been hunting since he was the height of a killrod standing upright. His family subcaste had produced 9 prior hunters of council rank. He had a designation ceremony scheduled for the following season, which would move him 1 rank closer to Hunt Prime status. None of this is in Droon's log. Droon did not know any of it. He looked it up 6 weeks later after the engagement, when he was trying to understand why his logs from those 14 hours kept arriving in shorter and shorter sentences. And he wrote Grellscore's subcast record into the sealed appendix of his final report under a heading he called, "Data I Did Not Have at the Time." The Western unit sent a frequency burst to Score. "Contact lost, grid reference, query for instruction." Score responded, "Hold position, sweep east." He did not know yet that holding position was exactly what the terrain wanted. Hour 5, eastern approach. The 3 Vuresi pack hunters moved on a sound signature from deep inside the eastern section. A human voice, distressed, repetitive. Not a word exactly. A sound. The kind of sound a frightened animal makes when it has been running for hours and the running is almost done. It came from a fixed point, slightly louder every few minutes, like something was getting closer to that point, or the point was getting closer to something. Droon tracked the Vuresi unit on his relay and noted the approach. He also noted, for the first time, a faint detail in the eastern section's visual scan that he could not immediately explain. A slight shimmer along a shallow arc of ground behind a low ridge, roughly 200 meters long. He marked it as a possible atmospheric artifact and kept watching. The Vuresi moved well. They were good hunters. Their compound eyes gave them a visual field of 340 degrees, and they fanned into that arc formation instinctively, the spread that maximized their combined sightline and left no angle of approach uncovered. The bioluminescent fringe along their spines was bright in the gray morning. They were the best visual ambush hunters in the council, and they were moving toward a sound that was playing on a loop from a buried speaker, driven by a small battery that Calamorn had waterproofed with 3 layers of resin 2 weeks before the engagement. The shimmer behind the ridge was 30 humans lying flat, holding emergency blankets, the thin foil kind rated Class 0 by council intake, angled at 11 degrees to the horizontal. Droon saw the fringe go dark before he understood what it meant. The Vuresci bioluminescent fringe dims involuntarily when the species registers a fear response. This is a biological artifact from their pack ambush culture, a coordination signal that evolved from predator communication, where darkness meant readiness. It is not in any species database accessible outside council-level clearance. The humans had found it in the Cravathi Observer Corps sealed pre-engagement briefing document, which had been sent to the human diplomatic mission as a standard intake courtesy package, and which contained, on page 41 of a document nobody had flagged as sensitive, a behavioral note about Vuresci threat responses in enclosed environments. When the fringe went dark, 30 humans moved. The weighted metal cordage they used was not a registered weapon. It was a utility item, the kind used in agricultural installations for crop framing. 11 of the 50 volunteers had listed their occupation as agricultural workers. They had been practicing the throw pattern for 2 weeks. 2 Vuresci died. The third retreated with its fringe still dark, and it kept running until it reached the engagement zone perimeter, and it did not come back. Droon's log for hour 5 contains 11 consecutive triple taps before the first sentence of the entry. The third Vuresci made it to the perimeter with its fringe still dark. Droon tracked it on his relay until the signal crossed the boundary marker and stopped moving. He logged the position and looked back at the eastern section. The emergency blankets were gone. The buried speaker had gone silent. The shallow arc of ground where 30 humans had lain flat in the gray morning was empty, and had been empty for some time, and showed no heat signatures because the humans lying in it had been in thermal suppression the entire time they waited. 30 people flat on cold ground, breathing slow, waiting. Droon wrote in his log, hour 5, 2 Vuresci confirmed non-responsive, 1 retreated, eastern section clear. He paused, he wrote, humans used Vuresci fringedom timing to initiate contact window. He paused again, then he wrote, the fringe data is not in any public species file. Page 41 of the standard Cravathi pre-engagement briefing package, sent to human diplomatic mission 11 weeks before designation. He put his data slate down. He picked it up. He triple-tapped it 9 times without writing anything. The humans had read the intake package, all of it, every page of every document the council had sent as standard courtesy. They had flagged page 41. They had planned around it. And nobody had stopped them, because there was no protocol against reading your own intake briefing. Everything was technically correct. Hour 8, and the terrain was doing what Sable Oren had told it to do. The western section of the Culling Flats had a drainage pattern that Fenwick Dahl had mapped across 94 pages, and in those pages was a note about a shallow channel that ran from the plateau's midsection toward the zone's southern edge. In wet weather, the channel held standing water. That morning, before the engagement opened, it held Ren Avish. He was lying on his back in 4 inches of cold water, in a thermal suppression layer that looked like packed mud because it was packed mud, 3 layers of it over the foil sheet, applied the night before with the careful attention of someone who grew up reading weather in crop stubble and flood lines. He was looking up at the flat white sky. He was thinking, in the particular way of someone who has decided there is nothing left to decide, about whether the copper smell got stronger before rain or after it. He believed it was after. He had believed this for 30 years and had never had occasion to confirm it. He was holding a cord. The cord ran 40 meters through the mud and the grass and the woven ground cover to the bundle that Calla Morn had built. The bundle was the size of a human child, roughly. Foil exterior, a heating element inside running at human body temperature, a movement pattern driven by a small motor that Calla had taken out of an agricultural irrigation rig and repurposed over 2 evenings in the warehouse. The motor created the irregular, stop-start, slightly desperate movement that a trapped animal makes when it is trying to find one more direction to run and finding none. Fenwick Dahl had found the right drainage. Calla Morn had built the decoy. Ren Avish held the cord. 3 Theron subunit members closed on the signature from 3 angles at speed, moving the way good hunters move when they are sure. They were sure. The signature was the right size, the right temperature, and it was moving wrong, too slow, too cornered. The heat spreading the way heat spreads when something is exhausted and afraid. They hit the trigger radius at the same moment. The concussive charge inside the bundle was not a weapon by council classification. It was rated as an industrial pressure tool, Class 2, used in mining operations for fracturing deep rock. Calla Morn had listed it at intake as a personal anxiety management device. Nobody had opened the bundle. The intake form did not have a checkbox for bundles. Ren Avish heard the pressure wave through the mud. He felt it in his back teeth. He waited another 90 seconds, then pulled the cord to confirm the motor had stopped, then stood up slowly from the drainage channel with cold water running off the mud layer and grass in his hair. He looked at the sky. The copper smell was getting stronger. He walked back toward the rendezvous point at a normal pace. In the first 11 days of the 21-day window, the humans had built everything. The pit traps, the thermal suppression zones, the noise rigs, the mirror arrays, the buried speakers. The drainage channels widened just enough to hold a person. The foil thermal matches cut and fitted to ground contours across the entire engagement zone. In the last 10 days, they had walked the terrain and rested. Droon's log for Hour 8 reads in full: 3 Theron subunit members confirmed non-responsive grid reference 774. Decoy device recovered. Classification pending. No equivalent in Council Tech Registry. Then, note on timeline. Then nothing else for that entry, just the triple taps, 14 of them in a row. Droon's relay had also been tracking, for the past 3 hours, a log anomaly he could not account for. Hunt Prime's score had gone silent on the unit frequency at Hour 5. This was not unusual for solo pursuit operations, frequency discipline in close terrain. But his tracker signal had been moving slowly and consistently nor-northwest since Hour 4, and in the past 90 minutes it had not changed direction once. Score was following something. The tracker showed his pace. Steady, unhurried, the controlled gait of a hunter who has a target locked and is taking his time. His thermal relay, the feed that came to Droon from Score's own sensors, showed a heat signature 160 meters ahead of his position. The signature was moving slowly. Occasional pauses, a slight drift south, then back north. The movement profile of a person who is tired and trying to conserve what they have left. Score did not report to the unit frequency. He had not in 4 hours. Droon checked the other unit frequencies. Grell Scores was silent. The western subunits had gone to static at Hour 8. The Vuresi Eastern feed had closed at Hour 5. Score was alone. He had been alone for some time, and his tracker was taking him nor-northwest toward a grid coordinate called Threshold Point 11. Droon's log for Hour 11 does not read like his earlier entries. The earlier entries have full sentences, institutional phrasing, the careful language of a Cravathi observer who has filed 14 prior engagement logs and understands that his logs are council record. Hour 11 reads like this. 1104 score tracker, nor-northwest, same bearing. Signature ahead, stationary, 90 min. 1106, terrain survey, grid N11, flat, open, no cover. Heat pack reading, 0.7 degrees above ambient. 1109, cross-referencing human intake files. Then a long gap. Then, terrain cartographer, age 67, pre-survey filed day 2 of acclimatization window. Survey length 94 pages. Standard format 3 pages. The difference was 91 pages. 91 pages of what Fenwick Dahl had noticed about the ground, where it drained, where the hollow spaces were, where the thermal signature of the soil differed from the surface reading by enough to hide a chemical heat pack taped to a stone. 91 pages the council had logged as excessive documentation and filed without reading. The sealed appendix of Droon's final report contains those 91 pages in full. Droon attached them without comment. He gave the appendix no heading. The signature ahead of Score had not moved in 90 minutes. It had been placed at Hour 1. It had been placed before Score's unit entered the engagement zone. It had been waiting for him. Hour 14. Threshold Point 11. The copper smell of rain had come and gone twice since the engagement opened. The sky had the flat white quality of a day that has already decided what it is going to do. The plateau was quiet. Score checked his kill rod's extension mechanism before the final approach. He had done this before every kill for 30 years. The rod had never needed checking. He checked it anyway. It extended clean, the barbed tip catching the light. He rolled his shoulders, and the pressure-reactive darkening of his hide deepened slightly. A blood-scent response, automatic. A signal his body had been sending for 340 engagements before this one. He moved toward the signature. One trap, then a mirror, then a stone warm in the dark. The signature held at 0.7 degrees above ambient. Right size, the right temperature gap. He was 100 meters out, and the signature had not moved in the time it had taken him to cross the open ground from the ridge. He told himself this was exhaustion. The human was too tired to run, had found a low rock and stopped, was simply done. He had seen this before. The ones that were done stopped moving. They waited. He was 60 meters out. The signature did not move. He was 30 meters out. It did not move. At 20 meters, he slowed his pace, not because his instincts told him to, but because the ground had a quality his feet noticed before his sensors did. A slight give. Not soft ground, the plateau was firm, something else. Something that had been built into the ground, rather than grown there. He took the last 20 meters carefully, one step at a time, kill rod at extension, heat pits reading the signature clear and steady and absolutely still. He looked down. Foil, a stone, 4 kilograms, maybe 5. A chemical heat pack taped to the underside with 2 strips of adhesive. The pack was still warm. It had been warm for 14 hours. It would stay warm for another 6. His kill rod was extended over a rock. 6 minutes. He stood there for 6 full minutes. Droon's observation relay recorded all of it. The empty terrain around him in every direction. The kill rod over the stone. The hunt prime of the Theron Dominion, 340 kills filed with the Council, standing completely still over a thing that was doing what he was doing, sitting exactly where something had decided he would be, at the exact moment it had predicted, having followed exactly the path that had been laid for him. No panic, no flight, no mistakes. He had not made a single error. He had read every signal correctly. He had tracked a heat signature for 90 minutes using the best biological thermal detection array in the Council, and he had arrived exactly on time. That was the problem. The humans had known how good he was. They had built the stone specifically for him. They had put it at the coordinate that bore his name in every topographic note Sable Oren had written in the 3 weeks before the hunt. Threshold point 11. Droon's sealed relay also recorded something else from those 6 minutes. A sound, very faint, from the direction score had come from. It was not in the official log. It would go into the appendix. It sounded like, though Droon could not confirm, breathing. The kill rod retracted. Score did not look up. He turned toward the extraction perimeter and walked, not ran. The Theron do not run from prey. He walked very quickly. Droon's log for hour 14 in full. Threshold point 11, note filed. 47 triple taps follow. The intake zone received 50 humans over a 40-minute window beginning at hour 24. No celebration, no noise. They came in the same small clusters they had scattered in that morning, except now they were not scattering. They were converging, moving without hurry, the kind of tired that comes from a job that was finished before it started. 4 had minor injuries, 2 sprains from the terrain worked the night before, 1 laceration from a misdirection rig that had triggered 4 seconds early, 1 concussion from the same rig. All 4 walked in under their own effort. Sable Oren was last, as she had been at intake that morning. She walked up to Assessor Vel Droon and held out a folded piece of paper. He took it. It was a topographic map of the Culling Flats, hand-drawn, marked in small, neat handwriting. Every trap, every thermal zone, every decoy position, every noise rig, every mirror array. Every drainage channel widened just enough to hold a person. Every heat pack position, every stone. At the bottom of the map, in a different ink, darker, written at a different time, was a single note. We built all of this in the first 11 days. The last 10 days we just walked the terrain and rested. She handed it to him and walked through the intake gate without stopping. Droon looked at the map for a long time. He triple-tapped his slate. He looked at the map again. He triple-tapped it again. He was still holding the map when Fenwick Dahl passed him on the way through the gate. And Dahl stopped and looked at the map and then at Droon. And then he asked, for the 3rd time, whether the engagement zone had good drainage after rain. "I believe it does," Droon said. It was the first time in 14 hours he had spoken aloud. Dahl nodded once, with the satisfaction of someone whose answer confirmed what he already knew, and walked on. "There is no form for this. There is no checkbox for this. There is no category for a thing that chooses." The Council convened an emergency session. The agenda item was listed as Charter 7 Tertiary Outcome Anomaly, Vaughan 9 Engagement. The session ran for 11 hours. No resolution was passed. The outcome form, 2 checkboxes, prey eliminated and prey dispersed, was discussed at significant length. And at some point in the 6th hour, a council member from the Vuresi delegation proposed a 3rd checkbox, and the session spent the remaining 5 hours failing to agree on what to write beside it. Hunt Prime Score's deposition was 3 sentences. The Theron Dominion filed a formal objection citing engagement zone premodification as a protocol violation. The Council's legal division reviewed Charter 7 Tertiary in full. Nowhere in 14 pages does it prohibit activity during the 21-day acclimatization window. The humans requested that window. The Council granted it. Everything was technically correct. The single surviving Theron, Score's 3rd in command, designation call, filed a separate deposition. It contained 1 sentence. They were already where we were going. 2 captured Theron subunit members were found in a sealed drainage channel at the southern edge of the zone. They were unharmed. They had been given water. There was a small folded note beside them, translated later. "You were never the target. Your certainty was." Droon sealed his log 3 times over the following 6 weeks. It was unsealed twice due to disputes about which classification category the engagement fell under. The third seal was applied by a council archival committee and has not been lifted. 11 weeks after the engagement, the human diplomatic mission received a formal notice. The council had created a new species classification, facultative conditional, species capable of voluntary behavioral classification shifting across predator-prey axis. The notice confirmed successful delivery. The read receipt showed it had been opened within the hour. The human diplomatic mission had not responded. 11 weeks. The notice sat in whatever system they used, opened, read, and left without reply. Assessor Veldroon's final log entry contains only coordinates. Threshold point 11. No analysis. No classification language. No intake form, no outcome code, no procedural summary. Just the grid reference of the place where 50 people had agreed in writing, 3 weeks before anyone arrived, that they would stop pretending to be something they were not. The council updated the charter. There is now a third category between predator and prey. They haven't named it yet. They're still arguing about what to call a thing that chooses. The map Sable Orin handed to Droon is filed in the ledger room under a temporary classification marker. The bottom note, written in darker ink, at a different time, before any of it happened, faces up.